Malidoma, have you found that bringing groups to Burkina Faso, for the individuals who have gone, helps to dispel some of the idealization of traditional cultures or people?
No. Then I can imagine you thinking, then why you keep doing it? The thing about it is that the people, most of the time, whom I've taken to Burkina Faso, have most of them fallen into a spell, a kind of daze, or should I say, epiphany, that even increased their vulnerability and their naivety. Over the years, since 1991, I've watched with much grief the way in which two cultures will come together and show a modality of interaction that is a clear display of the misunderstanding, the ground of misunderstanding that they entertain among themselves, unbeknown to themselves, and realizing that even while this is unfolding, my role there becomes completely nullified. I have no way of telling them, look, how you see this is not the way it is, and you too, how you see the other one is not the way the other one is. There is indeed a kind of fatal attraction between the postmodern and the indigenous. What that says is not really clear, but the danger it highlights are quite clear. And I'm saying that because over the years I've seen fatal accidents occur, which I could see coming, but could not say anything, because anything I said was completely misunderstood or even interpreted as hostility, reminiscent or revealing of a person with a controlled malady. And so as a result, I've come to learn the lesson the hard way. It is not at all possible for an encounter of this nature to happen without any form of skirmish in there, without a problem. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to younger generations of Africans who may feel called in a similar way to you to be a bridge with traditional wisdom and modern culture, possibly in the West, in the United States?
The problem intrinsic in this whole thing has a lot to do with the understanding of the culture. Being a bridge is less of a problem than actually the demand associated with this culture in the face of another culture that is willing to share its wisdom. Personally speaking, I've had to invest so much of my time studying at universities in the hope of finding the proper formula for articulating concepts that are barely existent in the modern culture, and still realizing when I was able to do that it was not getting across. But that poses a lesser problem than the other one that has to do with the natural endangerment that one puts oneself into, who wants to be this kind of bridge. My experience has shown me that there's more adversity in this work than there is cause for celebration of any type. Beside the fact that most of the news that comes to my attention are bad news about one type of emergency or another, and news about one type of conflict or another, resulting in one person's desire for this work being higher than the other, and the whole thing surrounding what people have come to call the inner circle, members of the inner circle versus those who are trying to be members of that circle. The complexity surrounding this work is enough to actually caution any person who is interested in taking on this job out of it. The other part is what happened the moment it appears that there is some form of groundbreaking or another. Call that success if you want. That's when all the demons awake. Where's the intention of terminating this whole thing altogether? And it has been my experience. I've spent more energy fighting against those demons than actually doing the work that I was called to do. Why is it that way? The only way I can understand it is that more often than not, the culture that hungers for anything redeeming or redemptive is also the culture who, perhaps unbeknown to itself, is working to maintain the status quo. I cannot help but seeing it this way, because my experience has taught me that being careful is not enough. Being alert might begin to add something, but then again, if you are sufficiently alert, you will hear voices that caution you to bail out of this. And so why am I in it? Because there comes a time when you got to say what the elders say to themselves. You go forward, you die. You go backward, you die. So hell, go forward and die. Which for me translated into this, that I went so far into this work that I couldn't back out. I just couldn't. Because every time I would try to, some catastrophe worse than the one I was facing that motivated me to entertain the thought would befall me, thereby getting me back right into where I started. And so as a result, I've come to this understanding that when Spirit calls you to do something, when the ancestors expect you to be on a certain track, the issue is that it's not up to you to invoke whatever amendment has been made in the invisible text of autonomy. It's not up to you to decide when you should draw the line. There is more to you than meets the eye. And you're only a member of a team that is working. And therefore, you can't quit like that. That's the short I can say about this.
Malidoma, an important part of the mission of the Earth Medicine Alliance is to support humans in nourishing our connections with our other-than-human relations. We understand this to include our ancestors as well as the many different beings that most people think of as the natural world. Starting with the subject of the ancestors, in your perception, how much of our personal and larger cultural problems here in the United States stem from a lack of healthy relationships with our ancestors?
Well, that's quite obvious to me when I look at it from my indigenous African perspective. I would tend to want to say that most of the problem of modernity are a direct result of a dysfunctional relationship with ancestors. The issue at hand is that for a Daguerre person like me, it's inconceivable to think about going into the future in a reasonable and reasonably sustainable fashion without a hard look into the past. Not to suggest that the ancestors belong to the past. No, far from that. What I'm saying is that without a live ancestral connection, it is close to impossible to envisage a future that can be as bright as the spirit of a person can wish for. And this is why it is an important thing, and even a viable suggestion, that most of the ills of modernity have to be traced down to what the status of their relationship with ancestors is. And you will begin to shed light into what needs to be done.